All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Kate Mooney. Recently just changed my name, just got married. Excited to have everyone here this afternoon with the Director of Athletics from St. Joe's. Welcome, Jill. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. We're looking forward to hearing from you and learning from you. You have just an amazing career and story, and we're just so thankful for your time. I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. I am the Young Professional Chair of the Delaware County Chamber of Commerce, and the Young Professional Chair. And it has been a pleasure working with all of the great team members at the Chamber, and we're so grateful for all they've been doing through this challenging time. So this has been great to have some young professional events, and we're glad that you're here to join us today. I currently serve as the Executive Director for Catholic Community Choir. We are a children's theater company based out of Springfield, Delaware County. We serve about 500 children annually. We do youth theater performances, ministry opportunities, and lots of other small programs for children so that they can shine both on and off the stage and continue growing as a performer. But I want to take this opportunity for everyone to be able to introduce themselves so we can connect with one another. So I want to hand things over. I'll start with, how about Jill, would you want to kick us off, and then we can have anybody else welcome themselves. Welcome to the group.
Great. Thanks, Amy Kate. I would love to start. I'm Jill Bodensteiner. I am the Director of Athletics at St. Joseph's University, and I'm relatively new to the Philadelphia area. I am starting my third year in this position. So great to be with you all today, and look forward to meeting some new people.
So how about, I see a couple other familiar faces on here, so I'm going to pick on Jamie next. If you want to take a moment to introduce yourself, and then maybe we can go around to anyone else who'd want to take a couple minutes to say hello.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. My name is Jamie Carezzi. I sell real estate at Keller Williams Media.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks for having me.
Who else?
So I'll jump in. My name is Joe McDonald. I also work at St. Joseph's University, so I'm here to lend some support to Jill, and also to, it's great to see some familiar faces at the Chamber, and I've been involved with some of your events in the past, and we just like to keep the door open for anyone who's looking to explore education or professional development opportunities at St. Joe's.
Joe. How about Wally? Would you like to say hello?
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. Wally Ratecki with the Kelly Mortgage Team. Hope we're all having good days here today. So I'm with the Kelly Mortgage Team. We're licensed by Envoy Mortgage. All we do is residential mortgages. So I think that really makes us experts in what we do. We really focus on providing that good client experience to everybody, and just educating them throughout the entire process so our clients know exactly what's going on. Wally Ratecki with the Kelly Mortgage Team.
Awesome.
I can go real quick. What's up, everybody? Dan Nolan, Jamie Carezzi. How are you? Amy, how are you?
Hey.
I don't remember how I found this meeting, but as a normal hawk, I saw Jill's name, and I'm currently eating lunch during my actual job's lunch break, so that's why I'm not on video. But as a former hawk, I saw Jill's name, so I figure it would be worth joining. I'm the director of search and emerging media at a small agency working on pharmaceutical accounts. So graduated from St. Joe's in 2007, but saw a couple St. Joe's names out there, so I figured I'd join.
Good to meet you, Dan. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Dan.
What's up, Jamie?
Awesome. And if anybody else would like to say hello and share where your background or where you work currently, we'd love to hear from you before we hand things over to Jill.
Sure. I'll say hello. I'm Krista McCabe. I'm a CPA with Brinker Simpson in Springfield. Thank you for hosting this. I had a few public public speaking experiences over the last year. Some went well and some went very, very poorly. So hoping to learn a few things today. And thank you for having me.
All right, Drew, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I'm Drew from River Avenue Digital. We're a full service digital marketing agency based out of Prospect Park. Seeing a lot of familiar faces here, so good to see everybody. I didn't go to St. Joe's, but my family are long-time Hawks fans, so that's good to see some Hawks here. And then we also got some T-shirts in recently, so it's been a big day for us. But looking forward to it, and good to see everybody.
All right, Sue, would you like to introduce yourself? You're a little bit faded on my end, but if you speak up a little bit, maybe.
That's the problem. I'm having trouble with my mic, so that's why I wasn't sure if people could hear me or not.
We can hear you.
Okay. Sue Yulo, I'm from Lisette Home Care Services. We're a non-medical home care agency. What that means is we go in and we take care of people either on a short-term or long-term basis, whether due to a medical condition like a stroke or Alzheimer's, or even somebody who just temporarily needs some assistance due to just having surgery. If we do is we go in, we keep people safe and healthy as long as possible so they don't have to go to a rehab or a nursing facility. So my name is Sue Yulo and I'm from Lisette Home Care Services.
Okay. All right. Sean, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Morgan. I'm sponsorship coordinator for PCOM. Thank you for this great opportunity. And also thank you to Jill for doing this event, and great to see you again as well. I did not graduate from St. Joe's, but we do have some Rutgers connections as well. So thank you and look forward to a great event.
Great to see you, Sean. Thanks for joining.
Christina, I know you just joined, but do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I was on a phone call right before this, but I'm Christina Valerio. I've been a part of the Young Professionals Committee for, I guess, a little over a year now. So nice to see everybody. I work for Liberty Mutual Insurance, and I'm an insurance agent in media. I went to Westchester University, and I'm currently studying for my master's there as well. I live in Boothwyn. I'm from Delaware County, and I just got a cute dog who is sleeping right under my feet right now. So that's pretty much it.
All right, if there's anybody else that I know quite a few people don't have their cameras on, but if there's anybody who wants to introduce themselves, they can just unmute themselves and go ahead and do that, or we can just get started. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, Jill, if you want to take it over.
I would love to. So hi and welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining. I hope today to inspire a little confidence and excitement about public speaking. And if first and foremost, I want everyone to understand that public speaking is a learned behavior. And if we have the right mindset, everybody can get better. And so to the extent that you come into this thinking, who was it that made themselves vulnerable? I've had some good experiences and some not so good experiences. I think that was Kristen. You know, we're here to build on those good experiences and help you to get that confidence. And so the first step in that battle is knowing you can improve, and it is a learned behavior. And the second step is getting some tips on how you start the process of improving. So hopefully you walk away with those things today. I'm going to share my screen as I tell you a story. And the story is about a young, shy, extremely shy kid from Valparaiso, Indiana, named Jill is our main character today. So this is me as a small child. I was extraordinarily shy, the kind who hid behind my mom's leg. I didn't order off from a restaurant until I was about 24 years old. I was just a really, really timid kid. And that manifested itself in a variety of ways as I worked myself through and up into adulthood. Like I said, as a youth, I was very shy. Sports was my outlet. It's where I found a little confidence. You can't tell from this picture, but I had the brightest red hair and freckles. And so I stood out. I skipped a grade. I skipped 4th grade. So I was already a June 1st birthday. So by the time I worked my way through, I was the youngest person by a landslide in my class. I graduated from high school at 16 and college at 20. When I got to college, I really struggled in finding my place socially and in the classroom. I decided and wanted and knew from the time I was 6, I wanted to go to law school. So I went to undergrad at Notre Dame, straight to law school at Washington University in St. Louis. And when I was in law school at WashU, my shyness started taking some new forms. And it was borderline panic attacks. And so for those of you who know anything about law school, it's taught by the Socratic method. And the Socratic method means the professor picks a student for the day and you're on. So I would start by saying, Sue, tell us the case. And then I'm using Sue to teach us the case for the entire hour. Well, that was so daunting to me that memories of my 3 years in law school are in large part dominated by memories of massive amounts of anxiety. Fearing that I was going to be picked on in class and it was going to be my day. And what happened was a physiological response for me. And so when I did have to speak in public, I would get extraordinarily sweaty and hot and red. So my entire face turned red and my neck would get all red and splotchy. And then you think, okay, I'm going to get called on. The physiological response is going to happen. And then it's going to be a vicious circle. I'm going to be worried so much that everyone can see I'm nervous wreck, and it's going to snowball and snowball. I remember I was a good student, and I remember being approached and they asked if I would be the editor-in-chief of the law review for my 3rd and final year in law school. And that's among the higher honors that a law student can have. And although I was extremely honored by the invitation, the only thing that came to my mind was when I was a first year, the editor-in-chief spoke to the entire class of 200, and I literally don't think I can do that. And so I remember telling the editor-in-chief, I can't do that. I just think I have too much on my plate. I ended up changing my mind, and then in a brilliant maneuver told my managing editor, I think this would be a really good opportunity for you to practice your public speaking, and got out of that major speech. But so made it through law school. As a young professional, I practiced law. I would get really nervous even meeting with the partners at my law firm, 1 or 2 of them at a time. And so this all culminated, my friends, shortly after 9/11. I'm a young lawyer, in-house counsel at the University of Notre Dame, and I was asked to give a presentation to our board of trustees. And I was 31 at the time. I was the expert on this topic, and I'm proud to say, I would say I'm one of the experts in the country on the topic. And the topic was, can a Catholic institution of higher education favor or prefer hiring Catholic faculty? And so I knew this like the back of my hand. I could still cite the cases, go in both directions for you today, but I stood up. I had, for the most part, avoided public speaking, but here I am in front of all the officers of the university and presenting my findings to the board of trustees. And I had a full-out panic attack. And it culminated in me kind of fake fainting because I wasn't sure what else to do. They brought the EMTs in, whisked me off. And it was at that point, shortly thereafter, where I said to myself, either I'm going to deal with this or it's going to be a long, long stretch. So went to a therapist for the first time in my life, even though my mom's a retired therapist. And she did some testing and quickly came back to me and said, you have one of the most profound cases of social anxiety that I've seen. So for 31 years, I buried that because I was afraid to make myself vulnerable and afraid with the journey that might come with having to deal with that. And so public speaking was one of many issues. This affected my ability to have relationships. It affected my career. It affected, just my social presence. And so I like to start by sharing that story because wherever you are on the spectrum of public speaking, you probably can't be worse than I was in 2001 and before then. So what happens when you get that diagnosis is you come to a decision point. And for me, I decided to make the leap. And so that's me leaping off a cliff of Jamaica, symbolically telling you that I decided to open myself up, make myself vulnerable, and decide that I was going to get better. So that was 2002, about 8 to 10 years of therapy and practicing public speaking, practicing being in social settings, and really just threw myself into it and decided that this is something that I wanted to address and I wanted to get better. So the culmination for me, I was with very little public speaking experience under my belt. I was asked if I'd be the keynote speaker at an event at the New York Athletic Club in 2012, celebrating 40 years of co-education at Notre Dame. And so again, New York Athletic Club, black tie, cocktail dress, which is first of all out of my element. And secondly, I had just sort of started getting my feet under me with respect to public speaking. So this was it. This was the, this was my moment. In 2012, they were kind enough to say, Jill gave a fabulous and inspirational keynote. We got a hold of a transcript, here it is. And as I walked off that stage after a 45-minute speech with no notes, I cried. And for me, it was tears of joy coming down and just thinking to myself, what a journey it's been, a 10-year journey with my social anxiety and trying to manage it and get to the point where I can stand up here without a note in a cocktail dress and talk to a group of a couple hundred people at the New York Athletic Club and felt really, really good about it. So that's my journey. The key word in all of this, in my humble opinion, is confidence. And that's what we're going to try and do today, is help you build that confidence in your ability to speak in front of others. So when you think about what my favorite book on this topic, and I'll end with a slide. I'm happy to share these slides to all participants, by the way. It's nothing on here is rocket science, but I do have a couple resources throughout. And so, this is my favorite book on the topic, Timothy Cagle, The Exceptional Presenter. Just a great book. That's how I learned when I went back and got my MBA, by the way, in the middle of my therapy. I went back and got my executive MBA at Notre Dame and learned from Tim. He was one of our adjunct professors and he was fantastic. And Tim says in his book, I frequently hear the following comment: I only present once or twice a year. I don't use these skills that often. And he says, that's not true. Every time you open your mouth to speak in public, you're a public speaker. So I wanted that to just kind of ground us into how broad this topic is and can be. So I want you to just take a minute, if you would, and reflect for literally, I'm going to time us for about a minute. I'm going to give us 2 minutes. And I'm just going to ask where you are on a scale of 1 to 10 on your public speaking, and maybe think of a couple areas you can improve and a couple areas where you're pretty strong. And then I'll see if anyone would like to share. So I'll start the timer and we'll give you 2 minutes to kind of just close your eyes or reflect on where you are as a public speaker. All right, I'll share with one thought of my own. I think I've certainly improved substantially since fainting in 2001. One area that I'm really working on, and I don't know if anyone else has this, I'm a procrastinator. And so I put together these slides last night at midnight. And so the reason that hurts me is because I don't get a chance to practice. and I don't get a chance to involve other people. So this morning I had an hour and a half long town hall with my entire staff, so about 112 coaches and administrators, and we got together for a town hall, but I didn't do that agenda till 11 p.m. And so that hindered my ability to get other people involved, and so it was too much Jill. So that's something I'm working on, is planning a little bit earlier so that I can either, A, practice, and B, get other people involved. So I would love if a few people would maybe want to share where they are now and some strengths and areas for improvement.
Yeah, I can go ahead and go first. So for me, I kind of feel like where I am in public speaking, probably I rate myself in the 6 to 7 range. Just because, when I go into a public speaking environment, I feel like I do a pretty good job of preparing myself. I've always been a pretty confident kind of guy. I really like the spotlight, all that good stuff. But some of my weaknesses, I'm a big and guy, as I think we could all hear right now. And then once I get rolling and once I really start talking and getting into the presentation, I kind of I think a couple of people on this call can relate, but I got a real heavy Delco accent, and that thing starts coming out once I start rolling. The accent really comes out. I'll start talking a little bit faster. So it's just some things I got to work on.
That's great. Thanks, Wally. And I can already assess that you're what I like about your style is you have a strong voice and pace. I can see you're one who has good posture and who probably uses your hands really well when you speak. So thanks.
I have good presence too.
Good presence. So thanks for making yourself vulnerable and sharing with us. One or two more people want to go?
I'll go.
Great.
So I typically thoroughly enjoy public speaking. My biggest issue would be speaking so quickly. It seems totally normal to me. I do get comments about it a lot. And when I listen back, I'm like, oh, I could be speaking a different language. I'm a very fast person. So the fast speaking is definitely one. And I don't prepare enough. So then I could talk for 4 days straight. So I would just go off on tangents sometimes. So to sort of have an agenda and stick to it, or to be able to go out and come back, I feel like would be very helpful to me. We'll start on one thing and I'll be like, how did we even just get there? So I feel like being more prepared and slowing down are definitely things that I very much need to work on.
Great. Your pace was very good there, Jamie. So you must be conscious of it.
I'm very conscious.
The more we prepare, the more concise we get.
Okay.
Right. So the more you prepare and really hone in on what are the points I want to make and how am I going to get in and out of this? I ramble when I'm unprepared because you're sort of shotgun popcorning all over the place. The more prepared you are, so those two things are going to come naturally together, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So thanks for sharing, Jamie. Do I have an accent, by the way?
A little bit, like a twang almost.
Oh, a twang. Okay. All right. So some people say I have a Chicago accent. I grew up in Indiana, but about 20 miles outside of Chicago. So I certainly don't think I sound like the Saturday Night Live skit about Da Bears or anything like that. But some East Coast folks think I have a little Midwestern flair. So one other person maybe want to share some thoughts?
I'll go. I feel like I'm in front of an audience a lot from my job. And so I feel I speak confidently and with a lot of enthusiasm because it's something that really interests me and excites me. And I feel really comfortable. But then when I don't prepare, I totally am a nervous wreck. Like I can totally relate my previous experiences, I think, to what you shared, Jill, from your first experience, and I could totally see that happening to me, although I think most of the time I come across totally ready and prepared, but inside I'm silently panicking.
And thanks for being vulnerable as well, because I think what the trick is, everybody gets adrenaline, everyone gets some nerves at some level, and the trick is turning that nervous energy into a really good positive energy when you're public speaking. So you're not alone on that. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm going to get back to my screen and continue to work through some slides here. So we are going to move on to Public Speaking 101. Again, a note about the book Mindset. For those of you who haven't read Carol Dweck's Mindset, it basically talks about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And I'll give you a couple examples. Let's start with me. I'm not a runner. I could never do a marathon because I'm just not a runner. Well, that's fixed mindset because I do have the potential. I'm an athlete. What do you mean? Because I'm not a runner? That's just because I've never tried it and I've never been good at it. So I got discouraged and quit. And so that's fixed mindset. Another example of me personally with fixed mindset, I'm just not really a relationship person. I like being alone. Total fixed mindset, right? And so fixed mindset people, and you can be at different things in different areas of your life. So you may be socially or relationally fixed mindset, professionally growth mindset, and so on and so forth. But one thing about mindset is for those who have a fixed mindset, we tend to be very negative. We tend to receive very negatively, I should say, when we get feedback. Why is that? Because if Christina tells me I did something wrong and I'm fixed mindset, I'm thinking I can never change. If I'm growth mindset and Christina gives me feedback, I'm like, great, thank you. That's exactly what's going to help me get better. And so I think the first step in understanding that public speaking is a learned behavior and we can improve is to the extent you don't already have a growth mindset, it's time to make that shift like I did with running. And prepared for a half marathon and then promptly tore my meniscus, proving that I indeed was not a runner. But it was worth the try. So that's just a little note about the mindset as you head into improving your public speaking. And then it's a whole bunch of more P's. We're going to prepare, we're going to plan, we're going to practice, and we're going to perform. So let's talk a little bit about preparation, which we just did in our intros with each other there. So I go through the following checklist, and before I'm getting ready to do any speaking whatsoever, I think to myself, who is my audience? And so just for example, this morning, I thought our town hall, who's involved? Who do we involve that's a campus partner that doesn't report directly to me? Who are the new employees? Because there are certain things I'd say, and we have 6 new employees. So who's that makeup and what do I want to say maybe particularly to them? So I always do a thorough analysis of who my audience is and before I speak. What is your objective? This may be the most important part of preparation. And so the objective, there are multiple objectives that could be at hand. One is simply to entertain. One is to educate. One is to advocate. When I was a lawyer and talking to judges, that was my goal was to advocate on behalf of my client. Oftentimes when I'm talking to donors or potential donors, I'm advocating for a project. I'm advocating with our board of trustees. And then similarly, sometimes you're asking for something. If you're on a sales pitch or if you're, again, trying to raise money, you might be making an ask. And sometimes you're just speaking to inspire. You want people to grab onto it and say, oh, I want to go out and tackle this. I want to try this. I want to do better in this certain area of my life. So those are some examples of what your objective is. And your approach is going to be probably quite different depending on your objective. What are the logistics? And as an inherent introvert and nervous person, I am really, really worked up about the logistics in a good way. I want to picture the venue. I want to know where I'm going to park because if I'm running late, that's going to throw me off my A game. So I want to know what the parking situation is, how early I have to be there. I want to fully understand the technology setup. And also, as my next bullet point indicates, what's my technology plan B? If I'm going into this using slides and slides alone, what if the slides fail? What if there's no microphone? What's my plan B? And of course, you're going through this list at varying degrees, depending on sort of the importance and nature of the public speaking event. Other logistics, am I standing or sitting? We've really had to, you got to bring a different energy when you're on Zoom or when you're sitting down because there's something natural that comes from our voices when we're standing up. Will there be Q&A? What will I wear? What am I comfortable in? Am I going to dress how other people expect me to dress? in which case I might myself feel uncomfortable, or am I going to wear what's appropriate for the occasion, but also something that I feel comfortable in? Otherwise, my nerves will start before I even get up there. Eating and drinking beforehand. I'm a big fan of craft beer, and I totally get into wine as a hobby, and I'm recently trying bourbons. I spent a lot of time in Lexington, Kentucky. I cannot drink before I speak. I mean, not a sip. Otherwise, I have a physiological reaction built in. I've got this fair skin, and sometimes when I have a drink, I can feel a heat in my neck. And so I'm not one to eat or drink before I do anything that's of even relative importance. So thinking through those logistics and how you're going to approach them. And then how will you deliver it? Are you going to use notes? Are you going to use slides? Are you going to memorize it? Do you have a teleprompter? Is it just going to read a speech? And if you are, you better have practiced it quite a bit so that it looks and feels natural to the audience. So my personal delivery mode is I started being more of a writer when I was nervous, and now I sometimes use slides if I think that'll benefit the viewing audience, but I'm mostly off the cuff. And here's how I do that, because the content is so important. I start with an outline, and then I group my outline. I use my outline to order what I'm going to say and when. And then I rewrite my outline into progressively smaller pieces of paper. And when you do that, you have to get more brief in your outline. So by the end of it, I can walk into a 30-minute speech, and my entire 30-minute speech that I'm looking at before I go up on stage is on a Post-it. And so that's my style. I start on one piece of paper. I then go to a sheet that looks like what might be in a hotel room, notepad next to your bed, and then I copy it. And when you copy it down to a Post-it, you have to get more and more brief. So by the time I would have started this presentation, it would have said, my story, learned behavior, prepare, plan, perform, practice. That would have been my Post-it. And that's enough then to trigger, because I've thought it through, I've visualized it enough in my head that I'm ready to go. So those are some comments. I'm going to stop there before I get into planning the content and just see if anyone has any comments or questions. All right, let's move on, and we'll have opportunities for discussion and additional exercises as we go through this. So next we're planning, and at this is the stage that is the most important for me, is the opportunity to develop the content. And then again, we talked about this when a few people shared their thoughts, is that how well you know what you're talking about is going to be 90% of the basis of your confidence. The other 10%, I believe, is experiences you've had in the past. So I can conjure up the good experiences, and Kristen, I've gotten much better at flushing the bad ones. What can I learn from them? Taking some notes on that and then flushing them, because if that's what's in your head when you get up there to speak, you're doomed. So for me, that 90% of the confidence is knowing what I want to say and in what order and what structure I'm going to say it, and 10% is me getting to visualize and relive the positive experiences before I get up there to speak. So let's start with what exactly do you want to say? Well, this has to go back to your objectives. So I decided my objectives for today's session were going to be, I hate to use the word inspire, that sounds pretty grand of me. I wanted to get you guys excited and give you some energy to go out and practice public speaking. I now get excited when I have an opportunity to public speak, and I want you to leave here thinking, when's my next shot at it? Because I'm excited to get out there and try some of my new things. So one objective was to inspire. The second objective was to educate. And so I sat last night, closed my eyes for a few minutes, and honed in on those objectives. And so, if I don't do that, that's when I tend to ramble. That's when I tend, Jamie, to start wandering from topic to topic, is if I don't have a clear idea of my objectives and how we're going to get there. And so, so what is the best structure? Are you going to use a story? Are you going to use a quote? Are you going to use numbers? Are you going to bring in a video? Will it be interactive? What's the order of events? I mean, those are all sorts of things that when I think about structure. So I'm going to walk you through what I did last night to plan for my town hall, which was an hour and a half. So I make a list of every topic I want to cover. And I sat there and it came up with, you know, in times in higher education and athletics in COVID-19, number one topic was morale. Number two, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number three, where are our student athletes right now? I'm embarking in a really, I think, fun initiative, which is I'm meeting all 490 of them in the month of October. And so that's resulted in about 60 meetings of 1 hour with groups ranging from 4 to 10. So I think I have my finger on the pulse of every student athlete and where they are. I'm at about 385 right now. And I start by asking them two things: who are you and how are you? And so when I report back to my president, when I talk to our coaches, I can with great confidence say that my student athletes are about an 8 out of 10 in terms of their mental and emotional space. And so next on my list for the town hall, morale, diversity, equity, and inclusion, student athletes and where they are and how they're feeling. And then I had a bunch of operational things: COVID health and safety plan, financial update, how we're planning for the spring, scheduling for the coaches, a working group I want to put together on how we're going to simultaneously run 20 sports in one semester. And then I had a bunch of things to celebrate. So we unveiled a $2.2 million basketball locker room project last week. I co-wrote a grant that got $100,000 to the Gompers Elementary School across the street, and so on and so forth. So I just had a list of what I wanted to get out there. And then I go back and I say to myself, what's the mode of the room and what do they need to hear from their leader first? And there was no doubt about it. They needed the morale speech first. They needed to hear from me, thank you. I can't believe we're still on ground and still practicing sports. And that's thanks to everything that you all are doing. So morale became my number one, moved to the top of the list. Number two, in light of our society and the election coming, they needed to hear from me on diversity, equity, and inclusion and why it's so important. The problem is I've been banging that drum for 4 months now. And so they needed to hear, I decided, from someone else. So I got a 15-minute video clip of the most phenomenal speaker I've heard in the past several months and decided to incorporate her instead of me being the one to share that information. Then I thought after those more uplifting, I'd get into the operational. That's where I did the financial update. That's where I did the game operations and spring planning, and really talked some nuts and bolts with them, because that could be a little bit more of the necessary but boring aspects of the day. I should have mentioned at the beginning, right after diversity, I brought some student athlete quotes, some of the things I've heard from them in what I'm calling our Hawk Huddle meetings. And then I decided after the operational, we needed another uplift. We're here for and because of the student athletes. So I gave a few more quotes and examples of the amazing things our student athletes are doing. And at the end, I closed by celebrating the wins and asked each person who was primarily responsible for that win to get a chance to talk about it with the group. So that's how at 11 p.m. last night, this is a group I speak to all the time. They know me well, but that's the kind of thought and process I went through in terms of what do I want to say, what's the order, and what methods am I going to use for each of those points that I'm going to make. I'll give you one more anecdote about kind of structuring and planning. I was asked last week to speak to our NAB, which is our National Alumni Board. And at this point, I've done so much public speaking, so many webinars about St. Joe's athletics, that I'm actually borderline sick of hearing myself talk. And so I thought to myself, these alumni all have one thing in common, and your audience doesn't always have one thing in common. These folks all graduated from St. Joseph's University. They are Hawks. So who would they most like to hear from? Current Hawks. And so again, I'm a procrastinator. So the event was at 7 p.m. At 1 p.m., I sent an email out to 15 of my favorite student athletes and said, would you be available tonight to meet some alumni with me? I had 9 of them respond within 10 minutes. So I now had my speakers. So how are you going to use 9 student athletes in 30 minutes and not have them waste their time? So I went through and I thought, you know what? I have talking points. Here's what I was going to tell the alumni board. How are we handling COVID-19? What are we doing about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our department? What are our student athletes? How are they? How's their mental state? And those were my talking points. I turned those into a question for each student athlete. I didn't say a word. I introduced myself and I said, Annie McConnon, women's soccer, how are we handling COVID? And I gave them their question in advance. And then I said, Slam Dunkley, men's rowing, tell us about your personal passion on diversity and inclusion and what we're doing about it as a department. And off went Slam. So sometimes you can use a variety of methods to deliver your content. So that all goes into this whole planning. What exactly do I want to say? What's the best structure? And how am I going to keep the people engaged? So those are some examples. Tim Kegel, my mentor in this space, says, when you're giving a presentation, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you just told them. Because we famously have low attention spans, and usually people are going to be engaged or disengaged within the first minute or less. And so, so I like to use that theme and that structure as well. What am I going to tell you? Then I'm going to tell it to you, and then I'm probably going to tell it to you again at the end. And so when I ended the town hall today, I basically had one sentence that recapped everything. Because we're a resilient and powerful group, we're holding it together morale-wise for the benefit of our student athletes. We're becoming a more diverse place than ever, and we're prepared from an operational perspective to get our student athletes what they need in the spring. Let's go do it. And so I told them again what I had just told them and tried to inspire a little bit of confidence in the group. So that brings us to, I'm going to ask you to take another minute, and I'm going to ask you to reflect on what I just talked about and what was my opening approach today and why, and what are some other ways I could have opened. So I'll give you just a minute and maybe ask for a few people to share. All right, let's see if anyone has any thoughts on my opening approach today and why I probably did that.
I'll talk.
Great.
So I think, I'm like, I hope I remember correctly. The opening approach would be to share the struggles that you had with public speaking. And I would imagine that the reason to do that would be sometimes when you're vulnerable, it allows other people to feel vulnerable and less worried about what someone is going to say if the presenter also had those same struggles. And whenever I do give a public a speech in public, I tend to do the same thing, or I say, I'm really nervous right now, just so everyone is aware. And then that somehow helps me feel less nervous. And so I think one other way, if I was in your position, if I had, and I may have a video of me failing pretty tremendously at a public speaking event, I may share that. Or like you may share one where you're struggling and here, you know, look, I struggled too, and let's all try to get better. So
that's great, Kristen. Thank you. You nailed it. Again, it goes back to my objective. If my objective is in part to inspire you and give you confidence that you can get better because this is learned, what better way than it is to share my story and use an example. And then, you know, I think secondly, my goal is to educate. So I'm telling you up front, here's what we're going to do, right? We're going to work on the confidence and get you excited about it. And we're going to give you some tips on how you can get better. So I foreshadowed to you that we're going to try and create a little energy and also try and give you some tips, which is the educational part of it. And again, you know, you're right on point, Kristen. I think identifying with the speaker is a really huge part of what makes hopefully a presentation more interesting. So thank you for sharing. I'm happy to take any other comments on today's start if people want to add. Kristen did a pretty darn good job. Okay, great. Thanks, Drew.
I think it kind of goes to, they say sometimes the best athletes are the worst coaches because, you know, if something comes easily to someone, then it can be harder to teach other people. Whereas with you, you know, if you had come out and said, oh, I was born to public speak, this is a gift that I was born with, then it would have been, you know, I would have maybe lost a little bit of credibility of you being able to teach me how to public speak. So I definitely thought it kind of cut the tension a little bit and definitely made it seem more relatable for us.
Great, thanks, Drew. And that was definitely the strategy. So even though this didn't come together at midnight, I knew from the minute I talked to Jessica how we were going to do this, I knew what my two objectives were. And so then it's just a matter of putting those together. So thank you both for sharing that. I'm going to go back and share my screen now. Time is flying, my friends. We are 14 minutes to go. So I'm going to talk about performing. What do I mean by performing? Much of the success of a presentation depends upon the intangible and nonverbal aspects. And so many people say that their favorite public speakers tend to be natural, conversationalists, and make it real. And we'll call that, for these purposes, authentic, being authentically you. People can cut through the BS pretty quickly when you get up and you're in speaker mode. I am to the point in my career where I have one mode. It is Jill. It is authentically real Jill. It doesn't connect with every single person, but frankly, the audience I want to connect with is my student athletes. And so I'm the same I am with them as I am with donors, as I am with my family. And there's such a sense of peace in being authentically you in all aspects of your life as well. Oh, I haven't moved, so my lights went out. Hold on. And so I think the best public speakers are those who can be authentically them when they're speaking. And I think you're able to cut through the ones who aren't in that mode pretty quickly. So part of performing is bringing an energy. And you know, in some ways, the most important performances or public speaking events of our life are interviews. And for the women in this group, we tend to do it even more than men. And what we tend to do is be so humble in interviews that we come across as duds. And so it is not my nature to be a self-promoter or a bragger. I just want my student athletes to be happy. I could care less what job it leads to. Yeah, I'd like to fundraise as well. But so when I went into the interview for an athletic director position, and out of 351 athletic directors in Division I, 10% of them are female, so 35 of us. And so you've got the odds stacked against you when you go into that interview. And part of what you have to do in an interview is sell. I know many of you are in sales. To some of us, that does not come naturally. And so being authentically me and being humble, but showing that confidence and that energy, that took a lot to master. And I can tell you, so few people practice job interviews. And it's, again, probably some of the most important public speaking events you'll ever have. So I tend to be an introvert, and my 18-year-old niece would describe both she and I as extraordinarily chill. And so there's a different energy I have to bring. It's still authentically me. There's no part of me BSing you today. I just need to make sure to bring it when I'm doing this. And so the energy, your confidence takes time. And the hardest part of this is taking that nervous energy and translating it into positive energy that the group can feel. And the best way to do that, practice, and being really conscious of it as well. So next on my list of performing is positioning and posture. Again, standing or sitting. I have terrible posture, so I have to try and remember and be a little conscious of it. when I'm speaking, but who said it early? I think it was Wally, has a good presence. It might come from just your positioning and how you take a room. So there's all sorts of books and articles out there about what to do with your hands. Tim Cagle says the worst presenting hands are what he calls T-Rex, when people bring in their dinosaur arms and kind of make them in some way as small as they can be, instead of just kind of keeping them naturally at your side. And using them to gesture as appropriate. So positioning and posture is something to be very conscious of when you're working through public speaking. Nonverbal behavior, hands, where are they? Gestures, eye contact, absolutely critical. If you are going to look at notes or something on or a full out written speech, you got to continue to practice until you can look up at your audience, because there's no quicker way to lose your audience than staring down the entire time. So I cannot stress enough the importance of eye contact. And you might be saying, oh, Jill, this all sounds so, whatever, you make it sound like this is something we should pull off overnight. No. That's why our final P is practice. But nonverbal behavior is really, really critical. We talked about the next one a little bit in our opening, the voice. Pace is a major problem for most people, and projection of the voice is a problem for people. They're often either too loud or too quiet. And then very few people go too slow when they get nervous. Most people, when they're nervous, go pretty darn quickly. And so really controlling your voice, both the pace and the volume. And then I think Wally mentioned it. Another aspect of the performance is the fillers. So the fillers, the most common ones are ending everything with right or ah. The most sobering and humbling experience of my life was taking depositions when I was a lawyer, because you have a court reporter, and boy, some of them take down every single thing you say. And so when I'd get that transcript back and they'd have my ums and my ahs and my right, and it was distressing to say the least. So that's another area that practice makes perfect. And some of them are not overly annoying. It's people who say with every sentence include the same fillers. It almost gets distracting to the audience. So that brings us to practice. And again, believe it or not, most people don't practice job interviews or presentations, big or small. As I said earlier, this is a learned behavior. No one would take off for a marathon without training. Well, some people might, but they have a special gift. And as Drew pointed out, I do not have such a special gift. So for me, this was literally 10 years of practice to go from panic attack to feeling really, really good and borderline excited when I look on my calendar and there's a presentation coming, because I think this is a chance to, if I do know something, share it with others. This is a chance for me to connect with new people. This is a chance for me to tell all the great things St. Joe's has going on, depending on the audience and the purpose. So that 10 years included a ton of practice. And how did I do it? Folks, video doesn't lie. And same thing for what Drew just said about coaches and student athletes. Our coaches spend more and more time with our student athletes going through video. And it is absolutely a fantastic way to make yourself vulnerable, but in a very safe space, because perhaps only you're starting by watching that video. I learned a ton about myself. I practiced a quote unquote elevator speech for when I do meet new people. How do I tell them what's important to me and who I am and what I'm about in a pretty quick and concise manner? I practiced made up speeches. I practiced meeting with someone one-on-one in a environment that wasn't overly comfortable. I practiced meeting with a boss or someone in authority over me. For me, there were certain people or situations that were triggers to my anxiety. Two examples of those, there were certain people who were triggers. Unfortunately, one of them was my direct boss at Notre Dame. When I moved from being a lawyer for the university into college athletics, my boss's name was Jack Swarbrick. He might be the most brilliant man in college athletics, and his self-described management style is to keep people uncomfortable. And so that combination of things, and Jack's a wonderful man, and he prepared me really, really well. and I'm forever thankful to him. But that combination early on in my career with Jack made him a trigger for my anxiety, his brilliance and his style of making people feel uncomfortable. The other thing I noticed was that if I was giving a speech and Trish said to me, Trish opened and then said, Jill, take it from here, I was much more comfortable than if I had to start something from the ground up. Being the first person speaking, and when you're socially anxious, you're completely fearful of having people look at you and being the center of attention. And so for me, having to start a meeting from the beginning was a real trigger for me. And once I made myself vulnerable, I was able to say to my boss and colleagues, could you help me out? Would you do me a solid and throw it to me after you set the thing up and intro it? And then I felt a lot better about that. So in practicing, you in videotaping, you get sort of a sense, you start to see and maybe think about what some of your triggers are. The other thing I did during my practice journey is after every time I did a presentation, I would take 60 seconds to jot down a few things. I would just jot down either nervousness on a scale of 1 to 10, didn't feel like I connected with my audience, or nailed that one, and then maybe some why. And after you started to look at that series, I could see a pattern. You know what? I'm at my best in the following. The ones I rated myself the highest, here's what they had in common. And I started to really get kind of a book of knowledge of what type of things set me up for my best success. So that is practice. Record yourself, seek objective feedback from people you trust. I found a woman to mock interview me for athletic director interviews. She was fantastic. And then don't be afraid, as many of you have already exhibited on this call, to make yourself vulnerable. So I am going to stop my share there. I did not leave as much time as I wanted because I was a bad planner, but I would be happy to take any comments or questions from the group.
Bill, a question for you regarding this virtual world that we're in. Have you adjusted anything, or have you noticed, I mean, it's obviously more difficult to read the audience, but in order to maintain your level of performance and impact, what are you doing? Are you doing anything different in the Zoom sessions versus in person?
It's a great question, Joe. And I can tell you there's one super positive thing about the Zoom sessions is that I'm on videotape watching myself every time I speak. And so what kind of a treat to get to see yourself. And I mean, this is as good as a videotape. I'm seeing my body language, I'm seeing my energy. And so I think use Zoom to your advantage. Check yourself when you're in a meeting. But have I adapted? I've learned that I need to mix up my delivery methods more via Zoom, because 1 hour on Zoom of anyone talking is a lot. So I do try and throw in more quotes, maybe a video clip, let other people speak, and have been, that National Alumni Board meeting. I kind of jokingly said I was sick of hearing myself speak, but I thought, I knew that audience, and a lot of them have been at my webinars. They might be sick of hearing me speak too. So I'm probably a little more conscious of what methods I use to deliver the information now that we're on Zoom and we're all having Zoom fatigue.
Thank you.
Well, gang, I like to end on time, and it's 1:59. So again, I think Jessica probably has your emails from registration. So for what it's worth, I will send her the slides. The last slide has the Exceptional Presenter book by Tim Cagle on it. If you are interested in following up on that. So I enjoyed talking about a topic that's been a huge part of my professional journey. And so thank you everyone for joining, and keep up the great work in your respective fields.